Hello, I'm Mary V. Today, let's talk about teaching yourself the violin. So, of course, we all know that there's plenty of technical advice on YouTube about how to learn the violin and certain techniques. But I think the greatest difficulty is knowing whether that technique is right for you and also adapting it for your individual needs. Our hands are different, the level of strength, the width of our shoulders, everything is so individual that all violin technique has to be adapted to us and tailored to us. Now that's something that a good teacher will do for you, give you exactly what you need and tailor everything to making you better. But if you are doing it on your own, there are certain things that can help you, that you can apply to knowing whether something is right for you and how to tailor it to you. So let's take a look at holding the violin first. If you have a shoulder rest, then don't put it across the violin like that. Put it at an angle like that. Because if you put it across, the violin is very much out to the left. But if you put it at the angle that I've told you, it brings it more to a better position, more in front of you, where you can look down the fingerboard and you don't have a neck position that is permanently turned to the left. Then there's bouncing your violin up and down to get used to the idea that the violin isn't rigid under your chin. Your head is in a natural position and the violin is held in a balance between your left hand and your chin. So don't bang your head down and clutch with your head and try to keep this shoulder low, right? Because if you put your head down, your shoulder is going to come up and you're just going to get pain. So try to fix those things so that you're in a natural position and you can look down the fingerboard at everything you're doing. Next, let's have a look at the bow hold, and so that you can get a nice flexible bow hold with a bit of movement in the wrist and the fingers. And this is because we need to cushion the strokes, otherwise they're very rigid, like that. So I suggest that you put your fingers down straight and then tilt them so that the fourth finger is on top and your first finger is curled around the bow like that. Right, so it looks like that from the inside with the thumb bent and the fingers simply like that, little bit spread out and then tilted like that. And that gives you the chance to have the most flexibility. So do plenty of waggling the bow around so that you can get used to the different weight of the bow, right? So that your pinky can get used to balancing the bow at the back. Without it, the bow falls forward. So the pinky does quite an important job of making sure that the bow is secure in the hand. Then putting the bow on the string and starting to play, make sure that you understand that there's a contact point for the bow somewhere between the fingerboard and the bridge. And where you put your bow to draw the stroke makes a massive difference to your sound. But a very nice way to play is to play about 3/4 of the way down, about there, right? And that vibrates the string very nicely. So practice putting your bow gently on the string, don't let it bounce, control it, and then just draw a bow using the weight of the bow itself. Try not to interfere with the smooth working of the bow. Our job is to get our muscles out of the way so that the bow can go down straight. You must try to cure any pain that you're having or discomfort. Do something about it and be in the spirit of experimentation to do it. You should be able to hold your violin without any pain and without any clamping between your head and your shoulder and without any clamping of your left hand. Even before you start playing, you should be in a very comfortable position. You should be able to bounce your violin up and down a little bit, move it around, to make sure that even with a shoulder rest, that you're not in a rigid position. Do something about any pain and rigidity that's happening in any part of your technique. For example, in the left hand, it's very common to squeeze between the first finger and the thumb. And simply tapping and being aware of the thumb when you're playing and learning how to tap really, really helps. One of the most helpful things for violinists is to watch other violinists on YouTube and hear what a really nice sound is, what a beautiful vibrato is, and how they move and how their technique looks. And if they are physically quite like you in their hands or their movements, then that's quite a good example to know. We all need to hear and see violinists working to see what's needed. I think the next biggest issue for people who are teaching themselves is a self-awareness, a realization that there's a massive difference between repetition and habit. Good habits are very helpful to us, but most of us are subjected to our own habits that we find impossible to change. And that's why breaking down our technique and what we're doing to very, very basic things is something that all violinists do, not just beginners. We all check and recheck the very basics of our playing, which is playing in open strings, making sure that everything that we do with our right hand is nice and relaxed. As we play more and more developed or faster music, we have to actually adapt and recheck that our basic functions are still nice and relaxed, and that we're not introducing lots of tightness because we're playing much faster or more difficult pieces. It's such a good thing to have the philosophy of experimentation. So let's take an example of the difference between habit and repetition, and why we need to have an awareness of that. Now, we do get used to our own intonation. Supposing every time you play an A in third position on the D string, it's slightly sharp, and you slide your finger down. So firstly, you need to notice it, and secondly, you need to practice your intonation in a different way, which is consciously, like this. So you've got to ask yourself, was that absolutely correct? Because what you want to do is teach your finger to go down exactly in the right place, and you need to teach your finger to do that. So you can't teach your finger to do that by sliding. That's a very poor way to practice intonation. So do the two open strings and then try putting the finger down in exactly the right place. You know, if it's right, it's right, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. But, you know, just try to teach yourself to put it down exactly in the right place, right? So you need quite a lot of patience. You need to know how to practice that in the best way so that you become more accurate. So that's a good example of how you can get a habit and muscle memory through repetition, and it's a good habit. But if you have a habit of doing this, I'm afraid that really is the opposite of a good way to practice. So we all end up with a sort of hybrid technique of things that we pick up over time from various sources. So we all have to tailor technique and make experiments to make things fit what our needs are. I've got a very short pinky, so I've developed a technique of swiveling with the inside of my first finger in order to help put my fourth finger down. And that swiveling means that I can stay in tune in first position. I mean, there are plenty of people with large hands who have no idea of the adaptations that a person with small hands and a very short pinky, what we have to do in order to play without any strain and pain. So that's the way of it. That's a good example of having to tailor it for your own needs. But if there was a rule about teaching yourself, it's get rid of pain. Get rid of tension and squeezing, and do your best to find out ways to have very, very basic things working well. So if you take two violinists with incredibly different physiques, say James Ennis, the Canadian violinist, who is very tall, has rather large hands, and an incredibly unusual technique. He wraps his thumb absolutely like that round when he plays. And also his pinky is really straight. His last two fingers are really, really straight, and yet he's a world-class violinist. And then take Bomsori, who's a wonderful player and has quite a small hand and a short fourth finger, and separates the first finger out to free herself to be able to use her fourth finger really well. I mean, their physiques are incredibly different, and their violin techniques are adapted to their particular physiques. So they're extremely good examples of what's needed. It's tailoring. So try to get pain-free and get in the spirit of experimentation. That's the best philosophy for teaching yourself the violin. So I wish you well, and I'll leave it there. Bye.